Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm really excited because today I am interviewing Paolo Platter, the co-founder and CTO of Agile Lab. Paolo's a really interesting man because he co-founded Agile Lab in 2014, where he serves as CTO, leading the operations and architectures in both big data and AI. Now, over the years, he's worked on complex big data projects across Europe. And since 2019, Paolo has emerged as a leader in data mesh and data strategy, driving multiple large scale implementations, contributing to the community, and more recently, creating and growing Witboost, which I'm sure we're going to find out more about. But it's lovely to have you here. It's lovely to meet you, Paolo.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So I just know with your background, we're going to have a lovely, interesting conversation. So one thing I always like to ask data people that I meet is how long have you actually been working in data? More interesting, how did you actually get into it? Because most of us arrive here by mistake. So I'm always interested, or accident is probably not mistake. I'd always love to hear how people got into data.
I went into data by mistake as well, so that's a true story. We started Agile Lab in 2013. Before I was a software engineer in finance. Um, then when we started Agile Lab, it was a consulting firm, but without a specific target. And along the first 2 years, we tried to find what was interesting for us, interesting for the market. And I remember it was 2014, I guess. We went by accident to the first Spark Summit in San Francisco. We entered in the room, we saw 2,000 people, and we say, "Oh, wow, there is something here." And then we started to get passionate about distributed system, distributed computing, big data. So I went through the whole journey of doing the data engineer in the Hadoop days, and then moved in more architect roles, and finally, as you mentioned, became more a data strategist. And so I did more or less the full journey from data engineer to data architect, data strategist. Uh, then obviously now in Witboost, I'm doing the product manager. So I have the opportunity to leverage my background in the data ecosystem, in the data space, and at the same time trying to fit this background in a software product, leveraging my past competencies of software engineering. Obviously, I have a team doing the software, but still a lot of connections I can find in Witboost that leverage my background. So.
Excellent. So it sounds like you've gone on that whole real journey from perhaps being much more engineering software focused to actually understanding that data itself is really, really valuable. And I think that's quite valuable. And I don't know that a lot of data engineers are there. Yeah, I was at a conference last year where we were queuing to go in various different theatres to hear presentations. And I did overhear somebody who was queuing for the data engineering thing going, "Oh, see, this is just because data engineers are really important that we've got queues here. I bet there won't be queues at the data governance theatre," which I was quite outraged at because there was. But, but I think sometimes people don't, they need to go on that journey to understand that you can do all the clever stuff around data, but if you haven't got the governance in place, it's not necessarily going to, all the other stuff doesn't work as well as it should do.
Yeah, all the data practitioners in the end need to be connected and interoperable each other and complete and be complementary to achieve a biggest result for the company. Uh,
Absolutely.
if they work in isolation, it's typically not going to work.
No, that's very, very true. So I think You must have a pretty unique perspective, because I think a lot of people kind of come from a techie side and stay there, or come from a business side and stay there. But you've kind of got that whole breadth of view, which I think is really powerful. So, from your perspective, how do you think that organizations can make data governance feel more like an enabler than a policing function? I think sometimes people think, as a data governance person, I just run around with a big stick and tell people off and tell them they can't do anything. And that's not the case, is it? So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, what I observed along the years doing the advisor for large enterprises, that governance has two is perceived in two ways. From one standpoint, is like a gatekeeper in the organization, so trying to hold on and stop and verify what other people are doing. And on the other side is like a, a policy and guideline factory. So it should emit how to do things to achieve the best results for the organization. One thing that I don't like, and I didn't see working honestly in large enterprise, is that governance is always happening after the facts. So it's applied ex post. Once the data is in production, you do the audit, you do the checklist, you need to do some remediation. But uh, if you need to do remediation, rework, all this wording means that you are doing things in the wrong place because it's too late. It means that someone already worked, put something in production, then arrive the police and say, no, this is wrong. You have to redo it. Okay, yeah, if I could discover this before going in production, maybe would be better.
Yes.
So for me, we need to learn from the software engineering practice and this and create a kind of governance by design. So something that is creating guardrails instead of guidelines, because very often guidelines got forgot or bypassed by other priorities. So I'm truly believing that governance should be embedded in the development process. So meanwhile, you are developing a use case, you need to take care of all the governance policies, all the governance duties, and you should have some automatic check to verify it. So to be able to iterate faster without waiting for the governance man jumping in, understanding what is going on, what you are doing, and so on. This is a huge waste of time. This process of shifting the governance in the development life cycle is what is called governance shift left. So I'm really an advocate of this because in this way the governance is moving from being reactive to be proactive and intercepting problem before and iterate faster is a more
Mm.
agile is more agile way of concealing the governance. And if you do this shift, also the teams that need to have the governance as a counterparty can perceive the governance not as a gatekeeper, not as the police, but more as a safety net that is helping them to go faster and safely than discovering everything at the end. So I think this movement towards the left, towards embedding governance in the development process, is what is really missing in the governance practice nowadays.
Oh, that's really true, and I like the idea. You say I often end up having conversations with people about stop being reactive. Don't allow people to do it wrong in the first place, and just constantly tell them to fix it. Yes, we have to do that in the early days of data governance, but I like this. Perhaps doing data governance by design sounds a great thing to me. So I think a lot of what you're talking about is perhaps decentralizing the data governance as well, letting it happen over multiple places, not just like a central team that's monitoring things. Um, I'm a fan of that. But I do also feel quite strongly that data governance needs to be applied across the board. You know, we can't let people off the hook just because we're trying to shift left. So what's the right balance, do you think, between giving teams freedom and enforcing, some necessary data governance?
Yeah. This is a never-ending dilemma, especially in the data world. It seems that we only have uh, excess, I mean, opposite position. So on one side, we did centralized data warehousing for 20 years, everything
That's yes.
governed and regulated by one single team. Every change management need to go through this team. So yeah, very good governance, but slow time to market. On the other side, at a certain point, we decided to do self-service BI. So the IT just providing a tool, I don't know, ClickView, Power BI, and business do whatever you want. This is the opposite. I mean, incredible speed, incredible time to market, everybody happy, but you are folding completely on the governance, losing control on patterns, access management, data duplication, everything. And then after a couple of years, you discover that these people built incredible things, but completely not governed. So I think data management need to find a better sweet spot between these two opposite situation, and it's not that easy to achieve. I think we should learn from the DevOps movement in achieving a better balance, because on one side you want to provide autonomy to the teams to iterate faster and deliver their use case in a better way. But on the other side, you need some rules that are protecting the ecosystem, protecting the company. So that's the role of the governance. So for me, creating those guardrails and those policies that in my wording I refer to policy as computational policies, so policies that can be enforced automatically without a human intervention. Introducing guardrails and computational policies is the right way to counterbalance these two opposite forces. You cannot achieve completely super strong governance and super fast delivery. You need to find a better sweet spot. Honestly, I believe that each company need to have the instrument to find their own sweet spot. Um, Financial institutions are very different than utilities, but also within the financial institution, small banks versus largest banks, there's no one rule that is fitting for everybody. So the point is to have something in between that is helping you to steering the company towards the perfect sweet spot. And maybe it's not possible to find it at the first iteration. It's not possible to sit. Okay, let's define what is the right balance between governance and speed. But it's possible to steer. Meanwhile, you see the results and how the company is reacting to the change management, because then in the end, these governance need to be embedded in the change management. So I believe that with computational governance, that is what we focus on, it's possible to achieve a better sweet spot between speed and governance. So without slowing down developers, but at the same time covering a good part of the governance needs. I don't think it's possible to cover 100% of the governance duties in an automatic way. Probably it's utopistic. But anyway, if we can remove 50, 60, 70% of these duties and automate them, it's already a big win. So this is to me the receipt to achieve a better balance between freedom and governance.
Absolutely. That sounds very sensible. And I've always been a fan of being very pragmatic and practical. We can't do everything. And I love the idea of perhaps, using technology to do, perhaps just the grunt work, the hard stuff, which will make it easier to enforce, to allow the people to do the things that only people can do. So I think that sounds really, really sensible. So, um, and going back to what you're saying before, a lot of people do think that data governance is a policing function and everything. But personally, I've seen a lot more people recently start talk about data governance helps deliver trust in data. Which I'm sure, like me, you'll agree it absolutely does. But to perhaps help anybody watching this get their head around it, can you, explain how do you think the data governance helps build trust across a whole like enterprise, especially when you've got multiple different data domains involved?
Yeah. Um, I always try to um, describe a community. So when you start to embrace data products and data domains, it's like if you have a community and this community need to exchange value among peers. And in the data management space, people are exchanging data. And so you will have one data domain building value on top of other data products maybe coming from another data domain. And you can exchange value with someone only if you have trust in that person. Otherwise, the exchange of value become a conflict very, very soon. That's why, for example, to buy an house from someone that you don't know, you need to have a notary or a lawyer in between guaranteeing and creating the proper trust to do the transaction. Otherwise, you will never do it. You will never exchange some value with someone that you don't trust. So it's important to create the right condition, the right guarantees for people to trust the data. I think one of the most powerful elements to create such trust is to establish data contracts, but data contracts that are guaranteed by a central platform. Because without this guarantee, it's just a promise, no? Someone promising you that they will deliver the data on time with this schema. So this promise can be done also by email or in a call. Instead, the data contract and specifically data contract enforcement is the real game changer. So you need to have a platform that is capable to enforce service level agreement, data sharing agreement, schemas, data drifting, and so on. If you create a platform with these capabilities, you can have people trusting each other. Otherwise, will never happen because as soon as things go wrong, people will start to blame each other, they will start to fight, and you see the trust turning into conflict. And when someone has too many troubles and problems in interacting with someone else, the solution is okay, I'll do it by myself because I don't want to deal with this person or this problem anymore. So the solution, that is what happened for the last 20 years, is okay, I duplicate the data, I take the data again from the source system, I will build my system so I don't need to rely and trust other to do it. But this is happening because there's no mechanism that is, no central mechanism that is guaranteeing the transaction and the exchange of value. So creating this condition is quite challenging. It's one of those problems that with Witboost we are solving, and we are solving it drastically. I mean, to me, it's the only solution is not light enforcement, but is strong enforcement at declaration time, at runtime, in every part of the life cycle. You need to create the proper condition to have people trusting each other. You cannot trust documentation. You cannot trust metadata that are mm, manually updated once per year because as soon as you find a disconnection between metadata and the real data, you lose trust. One, two, three. At the third time that there is a disconnection between the real world and the metadata on paper, the trust is finished and people will search for something else, will dismiss the data catalog with lot of uh, problems popping
Very,
up.
very much so. So that's some really useful advice, Paolo. Obviously keeping an eye on time and everything, but I always like to end my interviews asking for some like practical advice. And I loved what you were talking about earlier about perhaps shifting data governance left. So if somebody was watching this interview and thinking, well, we're still perhaps doing data governance in a very reactive way, and perhaps in a more reactive, centralized way. How would you advise somebody to go in and perhaps start this? How do they start moving data governance to that left?
Yeah, to me, the first movement should be towards guardrail. So trying to figure out in which place of your governance practice you have a lot of guidelines and try to shift these guidelines in guardrails, creating automatic policies, and then focus on putting the policy enforcement in some place that cannot be bypassed. A classical one is the CI/CD. So everyone need um, to do software deployment also in the data world that you need to bring the software in production. So in the CI/CD, try to build some policy so that you create a first step towards the guardrails. Guardrails are also very useful to educate people and to raise the awareness of people about what they need to be compliant with, because they will discover it time by time. And meanwhile, they are working. They don't need to read the tons of documentation. They just get an error and they say, okay, I'm not classifying this system for DORA compliance. Or, okay, here we have some PII and not taking care of them for data deletion. So learning by doing, it's sometimes more effective than reading a book or something like that.
I totally agree. That has been a great advice, and it's been wonderful speaking to you, Paolo. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.